question I usually get is, what is a chiropractic doctor? What do we actually do? So first of all, chiropractic doctors are specialist doctors who help with conditions and health problems related to the spine and the nervous system. We look at the body in a different way, in a more holistic way. And again, this is not a drug profession, not a surgical profession. So think about that similar environment for training a professional, but we do everything naturally. Our environment has changed a lot, hasn't it? A lot of us are desk-bound every single day. Has anybody heard the study that the longer we sit, the worse our health is? And actually, the more we sit, it's actually worse than smoking. Our body's supposed to move and have flexion and function, but the more we sit and compress, the more problems can start to form. Flexion and forward head posture. This is becoming very common in our society. I see a few people changing their seats after we start talking about that. So what do I want to see? All right? Normal spine, we should have a straight spine sitting up in here. When we look at the side view, we should have a curve in our neck, a curve in our mid-back, a curve in our low back. Our ear should line up over the shoulder. Now what do we see throughout our normal day activities? People have rounded forward shoulders, that forward head posture. Hey, what's up? This is our default nature now. This is our home base. What do you see about his posture overall? Very far forwards. If you look at your family, your friends, your coworkers, you're going to notice this is a very common pattern. Now, this does not mean healthy. Every day we're sitting in flexion, sitting in flexion. And this is turning us into that text neck, right? If your head tilts forwards more than 30 degrees, there is going to be a structural strain that develops on the back of your neck. And this is going to build over time. So how do we counter this, right? I prefer to put a hand underneath my elbow and hold it up. The only thing I have to focus on is bringing my shoulder blades back. Now, has anybody heard of scoliosis? This is deadly common in Singapore. Normal spine should be straight up and down. Let's say we have a small kink, a misalignment in the spine as we're developing, 10, 11, 12 years old. So what happens? The body starts to grow. The body starts to grow around this issue. The body's smart, but maybe too smart. So it starts to grow around that issue, but now we're like this. So what does the body do? It starts to adapt. Everything in compensation. And now what do we have instead of a straight spine? We have that S-shaped curve. Do you guys notice a pattern so far? You might see that one side shoulder is a little bit higher than the other. It's very common to have a left side high, right side low, because most curves are to the right, and that pushes your spine off like this. 80 to 90% of cases are idiopathic. Science does not have an answer for it. But realize that the development of our spine, it really comes down to a lot of daily activities. If you're not properly using your body, exercising, being in motion, and all you're doing is sitting on a tablet, the body finds a way to distribute that stress differently. So when we look at our spine, what we want to see from the back are all these curves, and there should be a big disc in between all these bones. These are the shock absorbers, the cushion for the body. So normally, if we look at our studies, if we're standing, there's 100% pressure. This is a study looking at L3, the middle of the low back, normal 100% pressure. Now what happens when we lay on our side? Well, now there's 75% pressure. There's less, 25%. So has anybody had a really bad back, you had a really good night's sleep and you felt so much better? That's that disc decompressing. If you lay face up, that's technically the best sleeping position. Why? Because there's 25% pressure, much more healing involved. Now where do most of us sit? We sit and lean forwards, right? We're hunched onto the front of the table. That's 85% pressure now, extra on top of it every single day. So if we're sitting 6, 8, 10 hours, this might turn into a problem, right? Now realize that this study was also taken in 1990. So do you think these numbers are higher, lower, or the same? Higher. Yeah. All this texting, all of our phones, all of our sitting, these numbers are going to be very dramatic coming in the next few years. So disc degeneration, right? That wearing and tearing process. Is this normal or is it just common? This is becoming a lot more common in our society based on what we're doing every day. If something innately tells you the right-sided person's a little healthier, right? Well, why is that? When studies look at the mid-back curve, right, that mid-back, she has what we call the anti-hunch, right? This is that hyperkyphosis. When we have a hyperkyphotic spine, too much of a curve, we have a 1.44 greater chance of mortality. That's death. All of these nerves that exit out the upper body go to your heart, to your lungs, to your stomach. If there's interference in between there, that's going to turn into a health problem over time. Well, damage from prolonged forward head posture contributes to muscle spasm, disc herniation, osteoporosis, nerve impingement. Posture has an impact on and helps modulate all body systems from breathing to hormone production. So it's becoming a little bit bigger, right? We just think poor posture is bad, but it's really underneath the surface changing so many things. What does it commonly do? Spinal pain, headaches, mood, blood pressure, pulse, lung capacity are some of the most easily impacted. What do you see? High shoulder, low shoulder, big head tilt. This is his default position. Now, is that healthy? No, definitely not. And what these are neurostructural shifts. Another way to explain this is a subluxation. That's the medical terminology. When you have a spine that's misaligned, it's not a dislocation, but it's misaligned. So why are these important? Well, these affect your nervous system. So what is your nervous system? Nervous system is your brain, all the nerves connected to it, and these run every cell, every tissue, every organ in your body. Now, what does the spine do? This is the armor for your nervous system. It protects it. So what if we have a small misalignment? Well, we may not feel it, but that nerve starts to get irritated. So instead of sending 100% communication to the brain, now we might be 80%. We might be 50%. The longer this sits here, the more irritation, the harder it is to recover as well. So how does it usually start? Well, we take a good spine, we injure it. You can have a high impact, high force, a whiplash, or the more common one, a slow repetitive strain. So what do we see? If you have a spine and it tilts, you give it time, gravity's going to squish it down, that disc gets a little smaller. If it sits here for about 5 to 10 years, we typically get what we call phase 1 degeneration, that wearing and tearing process. What happens? That disc gets smaller. It also starts to pancake out a little bit. Nerve not happy, muscles tight. If you let it sit for about 10 to 25 years, that's where you get a little change, right? We see a lot more bone spurs. This is permanent damage to your body. We see that disc. Imagine this like a jelly donut. The jelly's got to be on the inside. If I keep compressing it, the jelly's got to find out an exit. So it typically goes backwards. And if it goes so far and hits that nerve that exits out, that sharp shooting pain down the legs, numbness, tingling, pins and needles, more severe neurological problems. And we definitely want to avoid what I call auntie and uncle stage. This is when you see people walking with that really stiff posture. That is fusion of the spine. There's no motion there. Disc not happy, the health of the individual is not so good. We can get a whole host of symptoms, but sometimes it takes time for that symptom to build. Most commonly, we get headache, shoulder, and a little bit of neck tightness. This is common for neck problems. So low back pain. This is statistically the most common. Everybody in this room, 40% of people will have a big episode of low back pain. It used to only be from lifting, carrying your kids. Nowadays, with all of our sitting compressing, this is the big aggravating factor. Has anybody heard of failed carpal tunnel syndrome? Failed carpal tunnel surgery? A lot of times they say, this is the nerve that's irritated. It's not controlling this area. Let's do a surgery, open this up, make some room. And a lot of times it fails. Why is that? 80% of cases have a double crush injury. Crush number 1, crush number 2. They're only fixing crush number 2. As a chiropractor, we want to help get that pressure off. And that solves so many problems with carpal tunnel. So biggest take-home message, if we don't do anything about our health, things will continue. Things will progress. What we want to do is help to slow down this process. And it used to be kind of that phase 2 was that 40s to 50 years old, right? Your body just starts breaking down. You get a little tired now. Nowadays, I'm seeing phase 2 for kids that are in their early 30s, sometimes late 20s, and a lot of it just comes from this. Everything that we're doing every day. So what can we do to improve? First thing is proper form, a little exercise, and a little chiropractic. Make sure your arms are on the side. Start by shrugging your shoulders up for about 3 seconds, 2, 3. Now bring those shoulders together. You're squeezing between the shoulder blades. Don't hit your neighbor, but palms up. Bring your thumbs like you're touching yourself, touching your thumbs together. Pull, 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 squeeze between the shoulder blades. You might feel a little stretch here. But if you're sitting in your chair, I want everybody to turn a little bit to the side, so one butt cheek's on the chair, the other one is off. What I want you guys to do is get into a lunge position. So one leg is going to go straight like this, the back leg pushes backwards. This is a lunge position. Now in here, can we move ourselves forwards, lean our body forwards? You're going to feel a little bit of a stretch onto that front hip flexor. A lot of times with low back pain, that front gets very, very tight. So just a very basic stretch, 5 or 10 seconds. This guy had a heart attack halfway through his care starting. So he had to take a few weeks off. So what did he do? He was marking all day, right? Papers, papers, papers. I asked him, how do you like to sit? He goes, oh, I do this. You might notice from the photos he has that tendency, right? This is your pelvis here. Spine should be very straight up and down. He's got a very large tilt pushing off to there. What you do every day is what you become. And he had fatigue, low energy, muscle spasms, neck pain, all in the right shoulder as well. So this took about 3 to 4 months. We did an updated x-ray. He had a very big change, even with that heart attack. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. I think everybody can understand that. Whether it's investing financial or your health, all of these things, the more you do over time, the better the results.
So your nervous system is actually what develops in the first few weeks. Literally 4 weeks after conception, nervous system, so your neural tube starts closing up, and your nervous system, so your brain and your spinal cord start forming. That really just shows how the importance of your nervous system and how it is that master of everything, how that brain, the spinal cord, and those nerves will go on and form your muscles, your stomach, your intestine, your heart, everything along with it. Chiropractic care through your pregnancy is great. Reduction in labor time. So those who have been pregnant, or those wives who've been pregnant, will agree a shorter labor time would be perfect. Then we have the reduction in pelvic pain. So that is pain, I'll come across, pain across your lower back, pelvic pain, and that sciatic pain that kind of runs down that leg, and also that restless leg syndrome. So during pregnancy, just like with adults, so what chiropractic care is doing is removing the interference from that nervous system. It is allowing better alignment of that pelvis, reducing the stresses on the ligaments and the muscles, so your baby has a good place to grow, baby has optimum place to grow, and the mum can go on for 9 months doing her daily activities. Most important, that sciatic pain and restless leg syndrome comes on at night, so the mum can now have a better sleep at night. So ideally, we would want this here, okay? A head down, okay? So throughout your pregnancy, head down, so when the time comes, when the contractions come and the baby is ready to come out, it can go through the birth canal easily. We know that C-sections are quite a lot of birth trauma to the baby, to the mother, and then a normal vaginal birth is quite ideal. So what chiropractors and a lot of certified chiropractors use a technique called the Webster's technique, which has a really good success rate of actually turning the baby around from breech down to the normal. So birth trauma, what can cause birth trauma? Many factors. You have your false labor, a long or very short labor, when the mother is not dilating properly, and use of drugs to increase the contractions and pain relief. Unfortunately, a lot of the couples don't realize that using drugs to increase the contraction intensity and pain relief can actually cause a lot of birth trauma, because then they increase the incidence of your vacuum extraction and your forceps and your C-section delivery. So Gutman then went on and did research on 1,000 newborns and found that 80% of those 1,000 had C1, which is up here, nerve dysfunction, okay? And he said those 80% kids were now more prone to crying all the time, having a lot of irritability and colic. And the most common one that new mums present to us is the difficulty with feeding, attachment, including impaired sucking and swallowing. So the baby's not latching on properly. So jumping on, your kid is now growing up, okay? And you have tummy time. So what is it and when should you do it? So tummy time is pretty much your baby on the tummy when it's wide awake and it is supervised, okay? So ideally, you can honestly start from day 3. Okay, you've taken your kid home, and whether it be through the skin-on-skin contact or you're doing it while you're doing the nappy changes, it is ideal. But neurologically, that means how it's developing. It is important that you're doing it from 3 weeks onward. So if you haven't started day 3, you're then doing it from the week 3. It engages a lot of the neck muscles. It engages, it's now propping up nicely onto its arms and using a lot of the extensor muscles of the neck, which then develop nice curves. So you can, every time you kind of change a nappy, you lie them on their tummy, play around, and then you do that for 5 to 10 minutes, and then you repeat it 3 times a day. As the kid is growing up, aim for 20 to 30 minutes. This kid presented with a lot of 11 months old, your baby should now be crawling, almost ready to be walking. This kid was not crawling right now. He had a flat head, alterations in the spinal curve, and all due to the lack of tummy time and a lot of sitting down in those bouncy chairs, in the swings, and unfortunately just a lot of resistance from tummy time as well. Because his lumbar curves are now not forming, it is causing a lot of tightness in his thigh, his leg, his knees, so he can't straighten them out, and therefore it is stopping the ability for him to crawl when he should just be walking in the next month. The lack of tummy time has caused a lot of that flat head and that vision centers, and the brain development is now reduced, which are quite detrimental as you're growing up. Okay, more and more kids, whether we go out at a food center and eat or at a hawker center, we're seeing a lot more of this happening. Increased time on phones, tablets, iPads, TV, and less time playing around. Because it's a real problem, then who stepped in? And who is your World Health Organization? So they literally had to spend a lot of money and just to say, hey, if you want your kids to grow up healthy, please sit less and play more. Your kids between the ages of 0 to 2-year-old should not be using iPhones, tablets, or TV. Okay, that's it. 0 to 1, nothing. Not recommended at all. 1 to 2, 1 hour a day, and that too, even if it's just like really needed. In my opinion, I think 1 to 2 it's really not needed. So between 1 to 2-year-olds should get 180 minutes of exercise every day. More, the better. Between 2 to 4, it was also recommended that, again, 180 minutes, again, a lot of moderate to vigorous exercises, but they're also not to be restrained in a pram, a stroller, high chairs for more than an hour a day, because again, it becomes that sedentary sitting down, which is not ideal. Your children should not have back pain, okay? That is, doesn't matter where they're complaining of back pain, whether it is lower back, mid back, or neck, unless there is a traumatic insult or they've hurt themselves, they should not be complaining of pain. Increased weight in backpacks is increasing low back pains because kids are carrying heavier and heavier backpacks to school, okay? Studies have shown that children carrying the heaviest backpacks presented with 50% higher risk of back pain. And backpacks should be the lightest thing that we should be carrying, okay? It should be just 10% of your body weight. If your kid is 50, that only means the bag should be 5 kg. And then you have a bag, like a little kid, carrying a bag that is this heavy. It creates, can you see what I did there as soon as I had a heavy backpack? It changes your head to shoulder, the forward head posture now, okay? It is now altering the lumbar curve. It is causing shoulder imbalances. I would highly encourage that you start prioritizing tummy time. Engage with your child, be active, go play outside every day, okay? Turn off that TV. It's just horrible. Turn that off. Limit electronic time, yours and your child. When you have turned that off, then you can start engaging more with the kid and pay more attention to them. 65% of your nervous development, that means your brain and your spinal cord and your nervous system, happens in the first year of your life. So make sure that your kid is getting a really good start to their nervous system to avoid problems as adults.